She's a Swedish MP for the governing Social Democratic Party, by the author and commentator Douglas Murray. Welcome to you both. Leila Naraghi, the Swedish political establishment was outraged by Mr. Trump's remarks, pointing to a migrant riot that hadn't taken place. And then a few nights later, serious riots did break out in a largely migrant suburb of Stockholm. So he wasn't far out, was he?
I think he was far out because he's misleading the public with how he uses the statistics. I think it's important to remember that the violence has decreased in Sweden for the past 20 years, and research shows that there is no evidence that indicate that immigration leads to crime. And so I think he's far out, and the social unrest in these different areas is not because of the ethnic backgrounds of these people living there, but more about socioeconomic reasons.
Okay, no evidence that migrants are responsible for any kind of crime wave.
Well, the problem about this story, if I can say so, it reminds me of what happened after the Charlie Hebdo and other terror attacks at the Jewish supermarket in Paris a couple of years ago, when, if you remember, also a Fox News commentator said something that was sort of outlandish about Paris, and the mayor of Paris threatened to sue Fox News, saying, you know, you're making our city look bad. It's a bit like that. We're sort of
why?
Because the truth on this lies between Donald Trump and the Swedish authorities on this. The Swedish government is very reluctant to admit any downsides of its own migration policy, and particularly the migration it had in 2015. But there are very obvious, huge downsides, because Sweden, among other things, is not a country which needs an unskilled labour force, which doesn't speak Swedish.
What was raised is the matter of evidence. What is the evidence?
Well, first of all, if I can say so, the rape statistics in Sweden that have been cited are familiar with the rape statistics across other countries that have seen similar forms of migration. Danish authorities and the Norwegian authorities have recorded similar things, which is a very large.
They're not broken down by ethnicity, so we don't know.
This is part. This is part of the problem.
Well, let me get Leila Naraghi to respond to that.
It's again a lot of lies and rumors going about when it's about, for example, rape that was raised here. It's difficult to compare the statistics because in Sweden, for example, many crimes that in other countries are labeled as bodily harm or assault are in Sweden actually labeled as rape. Also how you count it. Because if a woman goes to the police and report that her husband or boyfriend has raped her every night for 1 year, in Sweden that is counted as 365 offenses, while in many other countries it's counted as one.
You know, we can argue on the statistics, but something's going wrong. I mean, I look at the recent news from Sweden. 6 Afghan child refugees committed suicide in the last 6 months. Unemployment among recent migrants now 5 times higher than it is among non-migrants. 5 times higher. We've seen gang violence in Malmo, where a British child was killed by a grenade. Rioting in Stockholm. The police in Sweden say there are now 53 areas of the country where it is now dangerous to patrol. Something's going wrong.
Let me get back to what I think is the core at this debate, if I may, and that is the right for people that are fleeing war and political persecution to seek asylum. That is a human right. And we in Sweden, we are not naive. We don't think that we can do everything. But we want to live up to our obligation, as every country has an obligation to receive asylum seekers.
But the thing is, you've changed your policy on that, haven't you? Because having taken in 163,000 people in 1 year alone, you then closed your borders, I think very wisely. You closed the border, which was open, which meant that 10,000 people a day at one point were walking from Denmark into Malmo. You rightly changed that. So you've realized that whatever one's aspirations as a country in terms of asylum, it sometimes meets reality. And Sweden is now meeting the reality of this. And if I can just add...
Let's respond to that, then I'll come back to you.
We are not naive. We know that we cannot do everything, but we want to try to do our share, as we think that other countries also need to do their share. But also let me say that if you look what World Economic Forum is saying about our country, they show that we are on the top of many rankings, the best country to live in, the best country to age in, the best country to have children in, the best country to start enterprising.
So why have you not been so good then, given all these numbers that you brought in integrating the refugees as they've come in? I'll just come back to the unemployment rate, 5 times higher among migrants than among non-migrants. And that is the highest ratio of any country in the EU and the OECD. Why have you not been able to integrate the people that you brought in for humanitarian reasons?
I'm sure that there are things that we can do much better, of course. But if you look, for example, at the immigration that came in the 90s from the Balkans, they are very well integrated. They are contributing to our society. They are starting enterprises. They are working in different fields of society. And they really helped our country.
Why have they not got jobs?
But they have got jobs. If you look at the
No, I'm talking about the migrants who came
But
in.
it takes time. It takes time with integration and establishment. And if we look at experience from the 90s, we managed it, and I'm sure we can do it again.
Can I just try to put this into some context, Douglas Murray? It is clear that Sweden has got problems as a result of the number of migrants that come in. Whether as bad as Mr. Trump or others make out is another matter. But perhaps I could just put it into a bit of context. Malmö, which has been at the epicenter of many of these migrant problems, its homicide rate is 3 per 100,000. Chicago, 28 per 100,000.
Sure.
It may have problems, but they're not huge.
No, they are pretty huge, and I think they'll grow. I mean, first of all, the Balkan refugees into Sweden in the 90s actually did bring a lot of problems with them. Sweden did, for the first time, see serious ethnic gang rivalries, as you know. There was an upsurge in gang-related violence that's gone on since. I would also add this: the situation in Malmö, in particular, it is exaggerated by some people. There's no doubt about that. I've been there many times. It's undoubtedly exaggerated by some. It's also vastly understated by the Swedish authorities. I come back to this issue, if I may. Take just before this recent influx. In 2010, 1 in 10 Jews in Malmö, of the remaining Jewish populations, registered some form of attack on them. It got so bad in 2010 that non-Jews in Malmö volunteered to escort Jewish people to services in Malmö because of the upsurge in anti-Semitism. And let me, one other very quick thing.
I mean, you've had a good say, and I've got to be fair here. Leila Naragi, what do you say to that?
I say that there are people trying to frame our country in a certain way to push their own agenda. I regret, for example, that President Trump is trying to slander our country.
No, I know you do that, but what's your
But
answer to the specific point on Malmö?
I'm saying that if you speak to people in Malmö and also to different congregations, they say that themselves are working together with authorities to improve this. And I say again that there are a lot of people trying to spread rumors and lies that are not...
Say, your situation is very like the situation we had in Britain when we had these situations in Rotherham and elsewhere. 1,400 girls were raped in Rotherham before the authorities, by which I mean the local police, the local council and others, even admitted it was going on. That happened in Britain in the last decade. Similar phenomenon. An upsurge in particularly sexual and other forms of violence, and then total denial by an entire political class is now something, just as we had it in Britain, that is now happening in Sweden. I see it in Swedish authorities, I see it in the denial that comes up, I see it in the desire to laugh and dismiss Trump, but he's not on to nothing. And that is a very painful thing for any society to admit to, and I don't blame you for wanting to protect your society, but honestly, it's much easier to admit to it now.
There are a number of Swedes who think the establishment is covering up the true picture, that you don't issue the true statistics, you don't break crime down by ethnic lines. People are suspicious of the major centre-left and centre-right parties now in Sweden.
But there is no denial and there is no cover-up. This is what I'm speaking about also when I say that people try to frame it in a certain way. I would say that, for example, the social unrest in different areas, it's not because of the ethnical background of the people living there. It's rather because of different socioeconomic reasons and the conditions. There is no research that shows that immigration is...
But you don't do the research into that. The Swedish authorities deliberately ensure that you cannot carry out such research. And what's more, after the Cologne attacks in 2015, it was the first time after those in Germany, that the Swedish authorities and the Swedish press admitted that similar sexual molestation has been going on for years.
All right, let me ask you one part, because we're coming to the end of a fascinating debate. Is it right to think now that, given that the problems not maybe as bad as many people make out, but clearly problems, given these problems, is the age of mass asylum seeking for Sweden over? You've cut the numbers by over 80% coming in last year compared with 2015. Is it over while you concentrate in getting right the people that you have there already?
We want to do our share, as we think that other countries should do their share. And we have done a lot, and now we are concentrating, of course, on integration and make sure that people get jobs, and also on big welfare investments. Because it's important to remember that for 8 years, Sweden was governed by a government that prioritized big tax cuts instead of investment in welfare. And that is also the result we are seeing now in the social
You should
unrest.
also bear in
We're
mind the
going to
possibility that
have
it
to
just
leave it
won't
there.
work. It may
We
just
haven't
not
got time
work.
to go into domestic Swedish politics on party lines, but I'm grateful to you both. We will make America great again.